have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jean, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, March 15th, 2026 issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Loving Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, for all its contradictions, by Llewellyn King. I won't let St. Patrick's Day pass without wearing something green and reaching for a glass of something that has been produced through fermentation or distillation. It is the least I can do for all the ways the Irish have enriched the world, but especially the English language and me. When it comes to writing, the Irish have what might be termed an ethnic advantage from the literary game changers in the last century, George Bernard Shaw, James Joyce, Samuel Beckett, and Brendan Behan, to two of the top practitioners of the novel writing today, Sally Rooney, who is only 35, and the prolific and so readable John Banville. When it comes to poets, William Butler Yeats is, to my mind, seated among the immortals. Yet, as I enjoy my St. Patrick's Day libation, I shall reflect on the contradictions that are Ireland. These are summed up in a personal experience. I was the American organizer of the Humbert School in Ballina, County Mayo for more than 20 years. One of my missions was to take Americans, often Irish Americans, who had never been to their ancestral land, to Ireland and the school. Summer schools in Ireland are akin to Renaissance weekends or Aspen Institute meetings in America. Some are literary, like the Yeats Summer School in Sligo, or political, like the Purnell Summer School in County Wicklow, or musical, like the Willie Clancy Summer School in County Clare. Mine, alas, is defunct, but it was named after the French general Jean-Joseph Humbert, who landed in Killala Bay to help the United Irishmen's Rebellion against the British in 1798, which was celebrated in Thomas Flanagan's novel, The Year of the French, and the movie based on it. The Humbert School was the creation of its director, John Cooney, a distinguished journalist and major historian. Its mission was to discuss Ireland's future at home and abroad. Before the start of 1 year's summer school, I briefed my Irish-American charge, Ray Connolly, on just how awfully the British, my people, had behaved in the northwest of Ireland from colonization in 1611 to the 1798 rebellion, to the famine of 1846, when so many perished or fled the great diaspora, to the notorious Black and Tans after World War I. They were a paramilitary force formed in 1920 to reinforce police posts, act as escorts, and conduct counterinsurgency operations. Their cruelty caused many Irish people to join the Irish Republican Army. I spared nothing in the telling of Albion's perfidy in Ireland. After the week-long summer school, on our drive to the Dublin airport and our flight back to Washington, we stopped in a pub. When the publican heard my English accent, he asked, "How's the weather over there?" I knew he meant in England. I had to explain that I was now an American and had been for years. The publican threw his arms around me and declared, "God bless you, you never lost your accent." Our exchange confused Ray. He reminded me that I had recounted the full litany of English horror in the northwest of Ireland, including after the 1798 rebellion, how General Charles Cornwallis, chagrined after his defeat in America, hanged 20 Irish rebels per day. "That," I said of the enthusiastic publican, "is part of the wonder of Ireland, its contradictions." Ireland's relationship with Britain is a fine example of those. Britain is a prime destination for work and for career opportunities for the Irish. They talk of London with affection, although they may still sing rebel songs with gusto and mention the horrors of the past as though they were last week. Under a treaty, the Common Travel Agreement, Irish citizens have the right of abode in England. For them, there is no frontier. Although I learn that this may change as people who have acquired Irish citizenship but aren't Irish born are abusing it, adding to the immigration woes in Britain. If the CTA should end, Britain would lose much, just as America is set to lose Irish talent because of immigration restrictions. When discussing the effect of Ireland on America, 23 presidents were of Irish descent. It should be noted that America has also had an effect on Ireland. On the downside, there is fast food. When I asked a cab driver in London where to go to get fish and chips, he said he preferred Kentucky Fried Chicken. On the upside, there is a celebration of St. Patrick's Day, which started in America. Before Americans went crazy for all things Irish on March 17th, it was a quiet religious day in Ireland. Now it is more of a celebration there, as it is here and much of the rest of the world. Sláinte. Fight Dementia with Regular Brain Workouts by Lisa Jarvis. If you ever needed a nudge to give your brain a workout, new research underscoring the benefits of, quote, brain training should offer fresh motivation. The 2 long-term studies add to a growing body of evidence that people can boost their brain health by doing mentally stimulating activities, such as learning a language, visiting a museum, or playing chess. They also show that consciously working to build cognitive resiliency can delay the onset of dementia for years. That's an important message as the U.S. grapples with the growing challenge of Alzheimer's disease, which affects some 7 million Americans and counting. Both studies were part of a wave of trials started in the U.S. in the late 1990s with the goal of better understanding how lifestyle, genetics, the environment, and other factors affect people's chances of developing dementia. Decades later, they are yielding real insights. For the first study, researchers mined decades of Medicare data from roughly 2,000 people who had been recruited in the late 1990s to participate in the Advanced Cognitive Training for Independent and Vital Elderly, ACTIVE, trial. That study had tested whether certain types of brain games might boost brain health. People were sorted into groups, each assigned one of 3 computer games that tested either speed, memory, or reasoning. Participants spent an hour playing the game twice a week for 6 weeks, and then did the same thing again after 1 and 3 years. That made it more than fun, a little challenge, like your daily crossword or Sudoku. It was hard work. The payoff, though, was substantial. 20 years later, about 25% fewer people in the speed training group developed dementia compared with the people who weren't offered the intervention. Interestingly, the memory and reasoning games did not have the same effect. Researchers suspect the difference is related to the type of exercise the speed game required of the brain. It tested people's ability to juggle several tasks at once, and, unlike with the memory and reasoning tests, players weren't told how to improve their results. And the better they performed on the test, the more difficult it got. Study co-author Marilyn Albert, who directs Johns Hopkins Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, hypothesizes that implicit form of learning improved brain connectivity or the ability of the different parts of the brain to work together. The booster sessions years on strengthened those links, she said. Ideally, future research would explain the underlying biology of how such a game reduces dementia risk. That doesn't require running another multi-decade trial. When the ACTIVE study began, scientists had yet to invent the brain imaging techniques that allow researchers to observe changes and signs of the disease in real time. Now, though, it would be possible to conduct short-term studies that pair the games with imaging and perhaps blood markers, offering deeper insight into what's happening in people's brains when they play these games, says Albert. New research could also potentially lead to even more effective brain games. Meanwhile, a separate study showed that building a resilient brain is a lifelong endeavor and that pursuing mentally stimulating activities early in life can make a difference decades down the road. Rush University Medical Center's Memory and Aging Project followed nearly 2,000 people to understand how their genetics and environment affected their chances of getting Alzheimer's. Participants were asked detailed questions about the types of experiences they had all across all stages of life, things like whether they were read to as a child, visited a library, or played chess. Researchers found that the people who were most engaged in enriching activities throughout their lives had much lower odds of developing Alzheimer's. And among those who did develop the disease, people who spent a lot of time on intellectually enriching activities were healthier for 5 more years, on average, than those who didn't spend as much time at the mental gym. About half of the participants in the Rush study donated their brains to science, which offered another fascinating insight. Researchers found that even people whose brains were coated with the telltale plaques associated with Alzheimer's benefited from a lifetime of mental workouts. In other words, 2 people might have the same pathology in their brain, but one could handle more wear and tear before symptoms appeared, explains Andrea Zammit, a study co-author and neuropsychologist at the Rush Alzheimer Disease Center in Chicago. One of the more encouraging findings out of the Rush study is that although the benefits were greater when someone seeks out intellectual stimulation throughout their life, people still were helped by enrichment in old age. As Zammit puts it, it's never too late to start. Of course, getting started can be challenging. The Rush study suggests the U.S. should be doing more to ensure everyone has access to enriching environments, whether that's libraries and museums or through programs targeting early childhood or older adults. Meanwhile, as studies like Albert's point to short-term interventions that can stave off dementia, doctors and policymakers should be considering how to integrate those into a healthcare system often more focused on treatment than prevention. After all, if these efforts ultimately allow more older adults to live independently for longer, they could chip away at the nearly $800 billion the U.S. spends on dementia care each year, while improving countless lives. The public is hopefully getting the message that we do have some control over our brain health. Proactive individuals might decide to pursue more structured activities. Older adults wanting a workout for their brain can try a version of the speed game that participants played in the active trial, while others might simply be more intentional about regularly opening up a book or challenging a friend to a game of Scrabble. In our digital age, the growing research on brain health is also a good reminder that while scrolling and posting might offer a quick dopamine hit, real engagement, that is, focused, purposeful activities, offer a much bigger reward. My View by Bob O'Connor of Hamburg. Sometimes it's clearly time to go. Isaac Asimov said, "Life is pleasant, death is peaceful. It's the transition that's troublesome." Although my church doesn't agree with me, I am a firm believer in our right to choose how we make the transition to the great unknown. Euthanasia, which literally translates to good death, seems like it would be an option for the terminally ill. My mother-in-law was in her 80s when she announced she wanted to die. She was still of sound mind and in reasonably good health. Her husband of nearly 60 years was gone, and she was bored and tired. Her nursing home transferred her to hospice. She told her caregivers there that she was in constant pain and couldn't sleep. Neither was true. They began the morphine drip, and she fell into a deep sleep, no longer received nourishment, and died a few days later. A good friend of mine was losing his dad to esophageal cancer. His father went through all the treatments, but when it became clear that recovery wasn't possible, he was transferred to hospice care. His condition worsened, and he asked to die at home. A hospital bed was set up, and he received in-home visits from a nurse. His dad was in a lot of pain one evening, so hospice was called for help. My buddy was told to go to the refrigerator, get a specific vial of medicine, and inject it into the old man to ease his suffering. The son did as he was told, and his dad passed away within minutes. When he relates the story, the son's eyes well up. He knew his father was dying, but he did not want to be the person to bring on his death. From what I gather, This is not a rare occurrence. A couple of years ago, my favorite uncle broke his hip. He called it the scourge of old age. I was there when the physical therapist began manipulating his bad leg. He howled in pain. I calmly told the therapist to stop. I have to evaluate him, she argued. No, you don't, I countered. He does not want to go through rehabilitation, and that is his right. She left in a bit of a huff, and the next day my uncle was moved to a standard hospital room. The morphine regimen began, and he was gone in a few days. He never married and had no children. As his proxy, I was never informed or asked about the introduction of morphine. I hope they explained to my uncle that the drug would put him into a deep sleep from which he would never wake up. I'm certain that my uncle would have chosen a quick and painless death over months of painful rehab and uncertain outcomes, but I was uncomfortable with the alacrity in which it was carried out. Medical aid in dying is now legal in New York, but there has always been a huge disconnect between what is legal and what is apparently common practice. No one ever talked about it. What frightens me is even with the current regulations and protocols, how do we ensure that patients are on board with taking the so-called big sleep? I discussed this with my wife and children. I made it clear that, if the prognosis were hopeless, I did not want to spend my last days attached to a machine, but they should be damn sure there was no hope before they pulled the plug. Number 2 son cracked, "Who says we're going to plug you in?" A greater need. As Catholic Charities deals with government cuts, local giving is key. It's time to give. Catholic Charities of Buffalo, a more than century-old local institution, serves individuals, families, and children across all faiths throughout all 8 counties of Western New York. If Western New Yorkers can pitch in, that important mission will be strengthened. The Catholic Charities Appeal 2026 has a fundraising goal of reaching at least $8 million by June 30th. Last year's effort missed its goal at $7.4 million, down from the $8 million in 2024 and $11.1 million a decade ago. Still, there is hope in Hope Day, the annual 24-hour matching challenge day on Wednesday. The first $100,000 in donations will be matched dollar for dollar from generous sponsors, including One Bridge Benefits, Energy Mark LLC, Lawley Insurance, Abbey Mecca Advertising, and the Franciscan Sisters of St. Joseph, among others. All funds raised on Hope Day go toward the annual appeal's $8 million goal. Catholic Charities is Western New York's most comprehensive human services provider, with programs and services that include behavioral health, basic emergency assistance, food pantries, education and workforce training, family safety and stabilization programs, and immigration and refugee assistance. Like other nonprofits, it has been impacted by federal government cuts, which have caused many Catholic charity agencies to reduce programs and lay off staff. Government contracts account for nearly 55% of Catholic Charities' annual budget, while the appeal accounts for almost 25%. The remainder comes through grants and awards from private foundations and legacy giving bequests from various benefactors. Approximately 14% of Catholic Charities' government funding, the 55%, has been impacted by delays, canceled programs, and other disruptions affecting cash flow. Appeal-funded programs addressing food insecurity saw increased demand during the suspension of SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which created additional strain on limited funds. A portion of the appeal also supports the Fund for the Faith, which provides needed funding for programs that support the Catholic faith experience across all parish communities, including hospital chaplaincy and training for the ordained and lay ministers, among others. For donors who want their donations used strictly for human services and not church-related issues, such as the priest sex abuse claims, there is a donor designation that directs dollars exclusively to Catholic Charities and its human services programs. Donors can also direct their dollars to the Fund for the Faith. If no designation is made, the gift will go to both, with a smaller portion going to the Fund for the Faith. Chuck Hayes, Chief Communicator and Development Officer for Catholic Charities, emphasized that these donations to the appeal go exclusively to programs and services. Anything that would be used as a contribution to the bankruptcy settlement fund comes from investments and reserves. Catholic Charities' goal of $8 million may seem substantial, but it does not represent the economic realities of Western New York's need. With an understanding that people's wallets are tighter and that these are financially difficult times, the organization is going to do all it can with the $8 million. To donate to the Appeal 2026, visit ccwny.org or donate and call 716-218-1400, period. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section on the Buffalo News on Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Why We Need Leaders Like Perkins Who Pursued a Clear Vision by Karina Castrillo. There was a time when the Democratic Party adhered to the needs of the working class. It advanced public services for the collective good and met corporate greed with rigorous regulation. One such visionary among the Democrats was Frances Perkins, the U.S. Secretary of Labor under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was under Perkins' guidance that Roosevelt passed the monumental New Deal, which included the Social Security Act, the minimum wage, child labor bans, and, for the first time, protection for workers unionizing. Thanks to her activism, millions of Americans have since reaped the benefits of old age pensions and labor rights. Perkins was one of those politicians who held the belief that the power of the government should be flexed to improve the lives of everyday people, and she used her position to apply pressure on those above her to pursue it. She was also the first woman to serve in a presidential cabinet. Today, our Democratic Party is overrun by moderates who have forgotten working people. Congressmen like Senator Chuck Schumer and Representative Hakeem Jeffries, who accept money from the hawkish American Israel Public Affairs Committee and the investment company BlackRock, cater to the demands of billionaire donors instead of defending workers' interests. Former Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat turned independent from West Virginia, raked in campaign cash from oil conglomerates and then famously refused to fund President Joe Biden's Build Back Better Act that would have guaranteed pay leave, universal pre-K, and subsidies for education. The Democratic Party's leadership has refused to stand up for the collective good, and in doing so has lost the working class vote to Donald Trump twice. Despite the MAGA right being the antithesis of what the working class needs, it has at least been frank with constituents about the miseries that plague our society. Of course, the president and his party lie about these problems, using immigrants as scapegoats instead of offering real solutions, but they highlight the problems, which earns them the trust of the working class voters. And therein lies the potential, giving workers what they want, action. Democrats have refused to do anything, and at this point, their rights are under siege. They offer press releases and petitions. It is evident that we need more leaders with the spirit of Perkins. New York City Mayor Zohan Mamdani is an example of the type of leader that people are desperate for. Mamdani's promises of affordable housing, rent control, free buses, and universal child care drove a majority to the ballot box. It's no wonder that Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Republican Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York are also popular. They talk about the collective good. We need more leaders who have an agenda for mass change. And this is what Perkins, the architect of the New Deal, fought for. Perkins knew what was important to provide a social safety network to root out poverty, provide pensions for seniors, and offer protections for workers. In a country where women still don't have access to federal paid maternity leave and millions are indebted due to the lack of universal health care, there are plenty of opportunity to advance policies that would effectively improve our standard of living. And while many people shy away from the use of the word socialism, it is the duty of leaders to make their case for why such policies would uplift humanity. March is Women's History Month. We should take this time to remember people like Frances Perkins, who had a vision for a better future and the courage to fight for it. Progressive perspectives. Republicans are willing to call war in Iran what it is. Let's state the obvious. We're at war with Iran. My evidence? U.S. forces working with Israel killed the supreme leader of Iran and many of his top aides. We sunk Iran's navy and destroyed most of its air force. We bombed thousands of military sites across the region. President Trump, the commander-in-chief, demanded unconditional surrender from Iran. He routinely refers to this as a war. Pete Hegseth, who calls himself the Secretary of War, also describes this as a war daily, such as last week when he said, "We set the terms of this war." The truth that we are at war is so simple, only politicians and lawyers could make it seem complicated. Indeed, a slew of Republican legislators insist we are not actually at war. House Speaker Mike Johnson, "We're not at war right now. We're 4 days into a very specific, clear mission and operation." Florida Republican Brian Mast, "Nobody should classify this as war. It is combat operations." South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, "I don't know if this is technically a war." Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, "This isn't a war. We haven't declared war." Pearl Harbor was a strategic strike, too. Then there's the claim that we're not at war with Iran, but Iran is at war with us. This is half true, insofar as Iran has been committing acts of war against the U.S. since it took our embassy staff hostage in 1979. But waging a war in response doesn't make it seem any less of a war. The main reason congressional Republicans reject the W word is simple. If it's merely a combat operation or strategic strike in response to an imminent threat, then the president has the authority to do it without congressional approval. If it's a war, then it's arguably illegal and unconstitutional within the framework of the War Powers Act resolution or the Constitution itself. Because under the Constitution, declaring war is the sole responsibility of Congress. This is at least partly explains why Trump insists he had a feeling Iran was about to attack us. He even suggested Iran was just weeks away from having a nuclear weapon and that he prevented an imminent nuclear war. The War Powers Resolution was intended to restrict the president's ability to use force without Congress's consent. It backfired. It says the president can respond militarily to threats as he deemed necessary, but then must go to Congress within 60 days for approval to continue hostilities. The result, presidents have a free hand to wage war for roughly 2 months unless Congress stops them. But congressional Republicans don't want to stop Trump. For those who only vaguely remember what they learned in high school about the War Powers Resolution, this riot of legalism only fuels confusion. Trump made the idea of staying out of forever wars a central tenet of America First. There's no textbook definition of forever war, so you can understand why some people believed it was code for Middle East war or just plain war of any kind. The irony is that Trump could make a plausible case that this war is allowable under the authorization to use military force George W. Bush received in 2001. But symbolically, that would mean Trump is continuing Bush's forever war. Polling shows Americans, including many Republicans, have no thirst for a long conflict, which makes sense given that they were not asked to prepare for this war. Hence, the insistence that this war would be short and tidy. The problem is that Iran knows this. That's why they don't have to win. They just have to ride out the bombings until the public or Trump loses patience with this very real war. By Jonah Goldberg, Editor-in-Chief of the Dispatch. Buffalo Next, your guide to a changing Buffalo-Niagara economy. Slow Rise in Wage Growth Still Outpacing Inflation Rate by David Robinson. The post-pandemic pay bump continues to lose steam. The average weekly wage earned by workers in the Buffalo-Niagara region through the first 9 months of the year grew by 3.3%, according to the new data published by the State Labor Department. That puts wage increases on a pace for the smallest annual increase since 2019, before the COVID-19 labor shortages put significant upward pressure on wages. Since then, the smallest annual increase in the average weekly wage was an 8.3% rise during 2024. Even so, weekly wages, which reflect a worker's hourly rate of pay and the number of hours worked, still are on a pace to outpace inflation by about 1%, which provides a modest increase in purchasing power to a typical worker. It comes as the pace of hiring across the region slowed last year, with employers grappling with the added uncertainty from increased tariffs and a slowdown in visits from Canadians. It occurred despite a steep drop in overall earnings from factory workers caused by the loss of about 3,000 manufacturing jobs over the past year, many of which stemmed from the shutdown of the Sumitomo Rubber USA factory in the town of Tonawanda in November of 2024. Factory jobs have a big impact on overall wages in the region because those positions pay about 24% more than the average job, largely due to the good-paying positions at local auto plants. Still, the average weekly wage for factory workers grew by 4.5% through the first 3 quarters of the last year. But with so many fewer factory positions, the total wages generated by those factory jobs declined by 0.7% through the first 9 months of the last year, the Labor Department data showed. Dynamic pricing. A look at algorithm-driven cost fluctuations and what shoppers can do about it, by Emma Patch. The only constant in life is change, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus famously said. When it comes to prices for goods and services online, sometimes change happens quickly, courtesy of a strategy known as dynamic pricing. Often shaped by algorithms that work behind the scenes, prices fluctuate to maximize the seller's profits. Dynamic pricing is nothing new, but the growth of the online shopping and developments in artificial intelligence have made it far easier and far more common for companies to deploy it across a wider range of purchases, from groceries to clothing. Demand is a common driver of dynamic price changes. Prices may, for example, rise in anticipation of increased demand at certain times of the day or week, or when an item is selling quickly. Competitor pricing can also have an effect, with businesses tracking what rival retailers are charging and altering their prices to match or undercut them. In some cases, in a practice known as personalized pricing, factors such as a customer's location or browser history may influence the prices they see. Where it happens. Airlines have long used dynamic pricing. Algorithms compare real-time sales to forecasts. If some seats are selling more slowly than expected, prices may drop. Likewise, if sales are beating expectations, prices rise. And seats are commonly grouped into fare buckets, meaning that a certain number of tickets are allotted to be sold at a certain fare, and when the cheapest bucket sells out, the price jumps. Airlines may sell 200 seats at 200 different prices, depending on when and how the travelers book them, said Scott Keyes, founder of Going, an app for flight deal alerts. Hotels and rideshare apps such as Uber and Lyft use dynamic pricing too. A local event, such as a conference, a concert, or weather disruption, can boost demand for hotel rooms and raise prices as much as 40 or 15%. During rush hour, bad weather, or major events, rideshare apps may double or triple fares. Ticket prices for concerts, sport matches, and other events might also fluctuate depending on demand, especially via third parties such as Ticketmaster. Increasingly, food delivery platforms are making use of dynamic or personalized pricing tactics. In December, Consumer Reports published an investigation showing that Instacart ran AI-driven price experiments that could show users different prices for the same grocery items at the same stores at the same time, with variations as high as about 23% on some products. After the report was released, lawmakers and consumer advocates called for investigations, and within weeks, Instacart announced it would end the AI price tests. Still, many delivery platforms continue to allow surge pricing during times of peak demand. Major online retailers deployed algorithms to optimize profitability, too. Any major national brand will likely engage in some form of dynamic pricing these days, says money expert Andrea Warwick. How to thwart it. You might not always be able to beat the algorithms at their game, but you can shop smarter by making these moves. Number 1, pay attention to timing. For airline tickets, booking within the Goldilocks windows, periods not too early and not too late, relative to your travel date, can help you avoid unfavorable dynamic pricing. For domestic travel during off-peak periods, the best deals typically appear 1 to 3 months in advance, while peak season domestic flights are more likely to be cheapest 3 to 6 months ahead. For hotels, book 1 to 2 months before your planned check-in date to get the best prices and availability. Or if you're flexible, you can often find good deals by waiting until a few days before check-in. Concert goers may benefit from buying at the last minute too. On resale sites, they spend 33% less than average when purchasing tickets the day of a concert and 27% less than the average the day before, according to a study by FinanceBuzz.com. Similarly, trying to shop online during windows when retailers may drop prices. A study from data gathering platform Decodo found that with online retailers, prices tend to be lower from 6 a.m. to noon, and that Tuesday mornings are particularly favorable for shoppers. Number 2, leave no trace. A common piece of advice to defeat personalized pricing is to clear your web browser's cookies, which store data about your activity online. Go into your browser settings and look for an option such as Clear Browsing Data or Remove Website Data. When you turn on incognito or private mode, your browser doesn't save your search history and deletes cookies data when you end the session. If a merchant is using your location or browsing history to adjust prices, these tricks might be effective. Number 3, shop around. Deal finding apps and browser extensions such as Camel, Google Shopping, and Slick Deals can help you watch prices and send alerts when they drop. You can track airfares and hotel rates using price alerts with Google's tools at google.com/travel, or use the price tracking features from hopper.com or going.com. Zealot Makes Music Production Accessible to Students by Mike Petro. Zealot Interactive came to Buffalo in 2022 after winning the 43 North competition as a music educational startup trying to advance a product teaching people through video lessons how to play guitar. Over the next few years, company CEO Sean Masavage came to understand more about the major gap in the educational system for teaching students how to produce their own music and become musicians at the next level. For years, there had been very little provided in school for music production at any level, creating a nationwide demand in the K-12 space. Masavage's answer has been Build-A-Band Creative Music Production, which provides schools with the resources and reference guides to take music students beyond performance by teaching them how to write, record, produce, and release original compositions. These are skills that prepare them for both higher education and, potentially, careers in music. Teachers just don't have the resources available to put a program like this in place. It requires hardware, software, and a curriculum, and when they're already trying to teach kids how to actually play the instruments, they can't really handle that, said Misavage, who was an accomplished clarinetist in high school but did not know how to pursue that any further and wound up going to school for engineering at the University of Virginia. Springville and Starpoint High Schools launched pilot programs this year using a Build-A-Band creative music production. The program complies with New York and national music standards and also qualifies as a career in technical education, given its curriculum areas teaching how to use a digital audio workstation and emphasize on musical career preparation. In addition to a curriculum of materials and media, the program includes video testimonials from Buffalo area professional musicians discussing topics ranging from how to handle disagreements between band members to how to balance working a full-time job and making music. Zealot Interactive also provided Springville with musical instruments. Springville built out a recording studio space in an old classroom, and students are doing covers and original music, Misavage said. Zealot Interactive programs offer exceptional quality and alignment with next-generation learning goals, Benjamin Higgins, Springville Technology Coordinator, wrote in a letter. The system, with its guided learning technology, makes complex music skills accessible, serving as a powerful platform for teaching concepts related to science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, he wrote. Zealot Interactive has also landed a contract with Bosse's Putnam and Northern Westchester and with districts throughout Long Island to help create a statewide network and financial stability for the Washington, D.C.-born startup, which is now working in 5 states. Misavage is talking with school districts in areas like New York City, Atlanta, and Philadelphia, and is hoping to open access for schools big and small. He's also looking to sign on more local schools and continues discussions with districts in the area like West Seneca. I'm loving the awareness that this is bringing and looking forward to showcasing what local students are coming up with and how they're going to be joining the community of local performing artists in Buffalo and all around the world, Misavage said. The startup's team includes 2 full-time and 2 part-time workers in Buffalo, 2 employees in Virginia, and around 10 worldwide doing development, photography, videography, and manufacturing. Buffalo will become the sales headquarters for the startup as it gets bigger, Misavage said. Buffalo has provided stability and a quality of life for his family, which includes a 6-year-old son, after winning $500,000 from the 43 North in 2022, Misavage said. The startup maintains office space at the Tri-Main building where Misavage has a studio and keeps guitars, equipment, and fulfillment. Zealot Interactive is one of the few 43 North winning companies that did not immediately move to Seneca 1 when it came to New York, Western New York. Buffalo has the available resources, lifestyle, employees, and drive, Misavage said. We're here to stay. He said his team was methodical about finding out if Build-A-Band creative music production could be valuable for school districts, and it was met with positive feedback. But some districts continue to struggle financially. We had 0 educational connections when we did this, Misavage said. I hired a few educational consultants to help teach us the process, and then we went at it to just reach out to these schools. Build-A-Band creative music production was rolled out this fall, and Misavage hired a head of sales in Buffalo who's a former music teacher to help get it off the ground. As an entrepreneur, people naturally ask me what's next and I'm going to do after I sell this. But this is like a lifelong endeavor, he said. It's very fulfilling going into an industry with such creative people and further enabling their creativity across an infinite number of genres, instruments, and styles. As Leather Shop closes, so does a portal to the past, by Samantha Chrisman. Step inside M. Steffens and Sons, and it feels like stepping back in time. Antique tools humming with history, rivets and buckles stacked to the ceiling, and a family legacy woven into every stitch. Soon, all of it will be gone when Linda Steffen, the great-great-great-great-granddaughter of the shop's founder, retires and closes the Main Street mainstay at the end of this month. When she does, it will be a sign of how much times have changed for a family of leather workers who opened a shop at a time when the skill to make and fix essential everyday products from boots to saddles was in high demand. Now, it's a niche skill in a throwaway society that values price and convenience over craftsmanship and durability. People ask, "Where am I going to go?" she says. "How do I know? I'm the last of what I do." M. Steffen Sons began in 1851 when German immigrant Michael Steffen came to downtown Buffalo and opened a leather retail and repair shop 1 block away from its current location at 761 Main Street. When the store closes, it will be a loss to leather workers who say Linda Steffen's generational skills are irreplaceable and that there is not a comparable leather shop for hundreds of miles. It's also a loss for Buffalo history, which is being dismantled as the time capsule of a store is boxed up. As her retirement approaches, Steffen keeps plugging away at a constant to-do list of mostly antiquated tasks for customers who keep bringing in more work, even as her friends and helpers swirl through packing up the store around her. On a recent day, she affixed leather tassels to a pair of bright orange shoelaces for a pair of combat boots a customer would soon be wearing in a fashion show at nearby Shays. That was in between some reconstruction work on a leather jacket once owned by Gordon Lightfoot, and she was almost done buffing out the marks on a leather case holding a vintage backgammon set. She ran her hand over a smooth expanse of thick black leather draped over a table. "I have to cut a belt out of that for someone," says Steffen, who has run the shop since the 1990s. Nearby are boxes and bins full of metal grommets, rivets, and buckles that tower towards the ceiling. Bolts of leather are rolled up on shelves. Antique display cases show every manner of leather paint, polish, and conditioner. Steffen picks her way past an impressive gilded safe emblazoned with the store's name and containing a store ledger that dates back to 1887. Nearby is a giant trophy she won for amateur horseback riding. She has brought in the old leather saddle she no longer uses, hoping someone might get caught up in her everything must go sale and take that as well. But the trophy and the 2 leather masks a friend made in honor of her horses are going home with her. "Oh, those were my boys. They were champions," she says, sounding far away. Her shop is like a living museum with supplies and machinery that are now considered obsolete. Recently, filmmakers making a period movie set in the 1800s came by and bought some old machines at a bargain price. "I gave it to them for nothing because no one uses them anymore," she says. One of her helpers advances down the staircase singing a Broadway tune with his full chest in a tone that is clear as a bell. Amused, but hardly distracted, Steffen shakes her head and keeps trying to figure out how to restore the backgammon set's weathered handle. One woman comes in to pay for a job being done on a pair of heels that hasn't finished yet. "Hold on to that $20 bill. Do you mind, sweet pea?" Steffen asks. A few minutes later, 2 strangers find their way in asking if they can take pictures of the old-timey shop before it closes. "Sure, just don't get any of me in 'em," Steffen says. By the time they leave, all 3 are laughing like old friends and have exchanged phone numbers. Matthew Miller, now of Washington State, first walked into M. Steffen Sons a decade ago and saw his passion for leather work ignited. "I felt like I was in the 1800s or something, like it was still horse and buggy outside," he said. "Her store gave me the leather bug and a great jumping-off point for starting out." He began hanging around the shop years ago, soaking up lessons from Steffen, who cheerfully shared her expertise. Today, he uses the vintage tools he bought from her shop in his work as an artisan maker of wallets, belts, and bags. "She even gave me a ride home a few times," Miller said. Lance Kasmark, also a leather worker, knows Steffen from their time in a group of medieval reenactors called the Society for Creative Anachronism. He said Steffen has a sterling reputation in their barony, as well as among area businesses, the theater community, and customers. She's always been there to teach people and give her time that way, Kazmark said. If you didn't have knowledge on a particular tool or a technique, she would always offer to teach you and offer advice on how to advance your skill. That sharing of skills passed down through the generations was priceless, he said, and especially hard to come by before the internet. She put in the extra mile, even though it didn't benefit her as much as it could have, Kazmark said, giving discounts on things, cutting up leather hides that normally she might sell whole, but people couldn't afford. And her shop has always been a destination. It's like a portal into the past. She preserved the shop so well. It was old and had a few crooked corners and everything, but it's not like modern leather shops that you might go into, he said. Of course, those are slowly disappearing as well. Stefan laments the Amazonification of retail. So many people are closing, she said. And those people turning to Amazon for shoes and other goods are finding out the cheap quality of what they buy is not suited for repair. When I repair something, some don't, some do, I give them a price and they say, I only paid this amount of money for it, so can't you do it cheaper? She says, nope, my time is worth something, and I have to pay the lights, the taxes, and I can't do it for nothing. And now, her back hurts. It's time to go. On March 21st, whatever hasn't sold in the store will be sold at auction. Some products are set aside for one of the few shoe shiners left in the area. One of the most well-known, who works at a barber shop in the airport, has died. Another is facing health issues. The shoe repair shops that used to proliferate the market were also mostly gone, but the ones that still exist will have to find a new supplier of polishes, creams, and leathers after Stefan closes. Come April, M. Stefan's Sons will be just another memory. A construction firm will take its place on Main Street, and another era will end in Buffalo. It's just time, Stefan says. Niagara University upgrades theater. Niagara University will use $525,000 in federal funds to modernize its theater facilities. NU will upgrade critical infrastructure, including stage machinery, lighting, audio, and communication systems to align the university's training with the demands of film, television, and live production industries. NU's theater program produces several shows a year at its Lewiston campus. Its performances are staged at the Elizabeth Ann Clooney Center for Theater and Leary Theater. The funds were secured through spending sponsored by Senator Chuck Schumer. NU plans to make the upgrades in time for the fall semester. Canisius forms a 4+2 partnership. Canisius University has formed a new 4+2 partnership with Syracuse University available to science and mathematics majors. The new pathway gives those students a direct route to master's degrees in engineering or computer science. The program is available immediately. This partnership directly advances Canisius University's strategic plan by investing in high-impact fields that prepare students to lead in a rapidly evolving global marketplace, said Nancy Wallace, Dean of the Division of Arts, Education, and Sciences. By developing strong academic partnerships like this one with Syracuse University, we are saving students time on their path to a graduate degree and accelerating their entry into the workforce, without sacrificing the personalized experience that distinguishes a Canisius education, she said. Grant boosts SUNY Niagara Nursing. SUNY Niagara has received a $150,000 grant from the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation of New York City to support its nursing program. SUNY Niagara said the grant will fund the hiring of an enrollment and retention specialist to advance recruitment, student registration, and case management efforts. It will also pay for instructional equipment to increase participation in the college's annual community health fair. Tops hits remodel milestone. Tops Markets has completed a $2.3 million remodel of its store at 890 Yonge Street in the city of Tonawanda, making the company's 50th major store remodel in 6 years. The project is part of TOP's capital improvement project, which has included more than $100 million in investment across 3 state imprint during the same time frame. The 52,000 square foot store got updated interior and exterior decor, renewed lighting, and more self-checkouts, renovated restrooms, and expanded digital signage that advertises promotions. There are expanded fresh and specialty departments, including Boar's Head premium deli meats, a larger cheese shop, a live lobster tank, and an enhanced gluten-free selection. The store offers more prepared foods, fresh sushi, rotisserie chicken, and made-to-order meals. Chipotle is coming to Lancaster. Chipotle is in the middle of a huge expansion, opening more than 7,000 locations in the United States and Canada. One of those locations is being planned for Lancaster. The Lancaster Planning Board is reviewing a site plan for the fast casual chain, which is known for its burrito bowls at 4839 Transit Road near Kohl's. Redevelopment of the property will include the construction of a Chipotle restaurant with an app-based pickup window for mobile orders. New Hearts thrift store is coming. Hearts for the Homeless will open its 3rd thrift store next month at 1595 Military Road in Niagara Falls in the Wegmans Plaza. At just over 10,000 square feet, the newest store will be twice the size of the location at 2217 Sheridan Drive in the town of Tonawanda. That gives it room for more clothing, more housewares, and more furniture. The size helps with a larger selection, said Nick Calandra, CEO and president of Hearts for the Homeless. We're trying to keep the feel pretty similar across the 3 stores. Donations that are made to the store's collection bins go towards stocking the thrift stores. The proceeds go towards food and necessities for people experiencing homelessness. Hearts for the Homeless has served more than 350,000 meals with its Hearts Mobile Food Pantry and similar number across its 4 pantry sites. Hearts has another store at 3531 Seneca Street in West Seneca. Its more than 500 red donation bins can be found throughout Western New York. The store in Niagara Falls is slated to open April 11th.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the National Enquirer. At 8 p.m., we have People Magazine. And at 9 o'clock, we have the New York Times Book Review. Stay tuned for these readings and more. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please stay with us. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Zero, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability